Hi everyone! Today I want to share some cards I made with the Country Living stamp set. It is my brother-in-law's birthday and he is an avid guitar player and collector, and I thought that a guitar card would be perfect. And the Country Living stamp set has just that guitar. It also has this really nice truck that I can think of a few people for that for too, and some cute western boots. Really sweet stamp set. So I thought I would make this card, and since I was watercoloring it, I thought I would show some techniques on watercoloring. So I'm going to work on this one, and I thought this was a little more feminine, and I actually have another friend who is a good avid guitar player, so I have lots of use for guitar set in my life. So I started out using some watercolor paper, and I'm going to stamp the image using the archival ink. And this will hold up to watercoloring techniques. There we go. Now you want that to set for just a second. Sometimes if you watercolor right away, it does bleed a little bit, but it usually holds up pretty well. So some of the other colors I'm using on the card are Pool Party, and then I've got some Early Espresso, which is the Splatter, and the Happy Birthday, and I'm going to show you how to easily add some splatter. I've also got some Soft Suede and some Smoky Slate in the shadow here around the guitar. It's barely visible, but I can see it. Hopefully you can see it too. And the guitar is actually a mix of colors. I wanted a reddish guitar because one of the guitars that my brother-in-law plays often has a slight reddish hue to it instead of a true brown. And so I added some Cajun Craze to some Soft Suede and used the two together. And I think this down here is just crumb cake. So I'm going to use some of these colors here. And I like to just start out with the main guitar image. Now I'm using my aqua painter. The aqua painters come in a 2-pack, and there is a larger bristle and a smaller bristle, and I think I almost 100% of the time use this smaller bristle. Even when doing backgrounds, I don't know why, I forget to grab the larger one, but you can see the tip difference here. And you just fill this up with some tap water. There are some fun techniques you can do. You can fill this up with some alcohol, rubbing alcohol too. And try that with some inks, and you'll get some different looks. Okay, so I'm just going to do some basic watercoloring. Now I used just a plain little block that I had sitting on my desk to mix some colors. Remember I said I wanted to get kind of a reddish color. So if I went with a pure Soft Suede, I would get more of this woodsy brown. And a pure Cajun Craze is more orange, and I wanted a mixture. Another thing to put on your desk while you're working is the Stampin' Scrub. You use this to clean your stamps, but you can also use it to squeeze your bottle slightly to get some moisture onto the tip, and just rub it on there to clean off some color. So to mix them, I just found a surface to do that on. I picked up some with the brush, some ink, and then I wiped it on my Stampin' Scrub, and then I picked up some espresso, and I'm going to mix the two together. And you don't need a lot of ink for this image. It's rather small, so I didn't do a whole lot. So I'm just going to go ahead and start coloring. I tend to start coloring in areas where I want it to be darkest, just because you never quite know how much ink is on that. And so I start in areas that I don't mind it being a little darker. So we're going to go over here. I don't like to use my brush too wet. I suggest you play with it a little bit and see what works best for you. I like to have it on the dry side when I do these smaller images. Okay, it's all rather flat right now, but I'm going to go ahead and pick up a little bit more ink, and I'll add it to these little shadow areas here. I'll add some down here and here where it curves a little bit. And then let's get the side here. I want that side to be just a little darker. So I'm going to go over it again. And I might even pick up a little bit more of that espresso. Darken up this bottom here. There we go. All right, so we've got that done. Now, I am not a guitar player, so I don't know the terms. This little handle here, I'm going to call it a handle. I know these things here are frets, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, but I want them to be a slightly different color. Some of the guitars that I see laying around, actually we've got a few laying around our house. My husband kind of plays around with it sometimes, and my youngest son. So I've got some laying around, and my brother-in-law lives close by and sometimes leaves a guitar here. Okay, so I'm going to add a different color to, like a deeper color here. I just want it to look like there's made with different woods. Okay, now right now it's pretty flat, so I'm going to go ahead and I know that there's little fret things across here, and I'm just going to start at one side and just make a little swipe across just to kind of give the impression of something going on there. And these little strings are coming down. Maybe add a little shadow to one side. I try not to overthink watercolor because you want it to flow. Okay, so I think I'm going to just leave that there. Now, back here is kind of a shadow. It's like a hollow part. So I'm going to make it this color, but then I'm going to put some gray on top. I'm going to clean my brush on my Stampin' Scrub. Here we go. I think I need a little bit more water. So when you squeeze the barrel, a little bit more water comes to the tip. However, sometimes it's too much water, so I usually run it over the dry side of my Stampin' Scrub just to get some of that water out. So there we go. And now I'm going to add a little bit of darkness to one side. I'll let that dry because I got a little bit too much water on it. So across the bottom here, I used some crumb cake. Now if I'm not mixing, I just go straight from the lid. I just use a block to mix colors. So I kind of thought this was like leaning up against a wall, perhaps. So I'm going to go ahead and add some floor. And let that sit for just a second. So it's easy to use an aqua painter because you don't have to have that cup of water where you swish your colors. And when I want to switch colors, I just kind of go like this, make sure there's not a lot of color still on here. I'm going to add that gray to the interior. Now, I wanted this to dry because when you add another layer on top of it, see, it's really quick dry. I'm going to go ahead and add some more crumb cake, but I want it to be on top of this dried area to get it darker, kind of like a shadow from the leaning guitar. So I wanted it to be darker. So I'm going color over color, but just darken it up a bit. Okay. So let that dry, and I'm going to clean my brush on my Stampin' Scrub. You know, maybe I'll put it in the shot. I just kind of go like this. Sometimes I squeeze a drop of water and go like that. Okay, so now I want to do a little bit of background, and I think that the area around the guitar is sufficiently dry. So this is Pool Party. I like to work upside down. Okay, now the background I need to not have such a dry brush because we're doing a large area. So I'm just going to make it a little wetter by squeezing the barrel. Now I'm going to let that dry for a moment and put away my pool party. I'm going to let it sit. I'm only going to let it sit for just a minute. I'm going to speed up the recording so you don't have to watch me watch it. But really, it only takes about a minute. This is not a long process. Okay, while that's drying, what I thought I would do is stamp the happy birthday. I'll be efficient with my time. So I just used a little scrap of the same watercolor paper, and I wanted it to be a darker color, so I'm going to use Early Espresso. There we go. And I like to flag the ends. I just go up in the center and then meet that point. There we go. And this should be dry. Yep. Okay. Is that clean? Yes. Alright, so I'm going to add a tiny shadow with gray behind the guitar as it's leaning up against the wall. And how I'm doing that is I'm just going to go down the outline. Okay. I have a tendency to sometimes overdo, so just leave it, let it go. Alright, and now I'm going to add some splatter. I'm going to show you on both of these. It just kind of softens the look a little bit and kind of brings in some more of this dark, because I'm going to mount it onto something dark. Here it is here on this one. And I think it just adds a little bit of interest. So how I'm going to do the splatter, my favorite way to do it, I think probably the easiest way to do it, is to go ahead and squeeze that barrel so that the tip gets wet. You can kind of see it coming down the barrel. There, oop, it drops. And get it good and wet. And then you're going to take a big swap of ink. And then you're going to go ahead, and I like to start on this off to the side to see if I'm doing it right. And you're just going to, this is the lid, and I'm going to take this and just flick it. There. And that's it. Just add a little flicks of some splatter. It's really quite simple. And then I gotta clean this off my brush, and I'm gonna clean my lid before I put it back on. And that is it for our watercoloring. See, it was pretty simple. So now we're just gonna put the card together. I thought it would be fun to kind of distress the edges, and you can do that. Let me let that dry for a minute before I distress the edges. So I'll go ahead and layer the card. I made a base of Early Espresso, and I'm gonna put some wood paper from the new stack. It is called Wood Textures Designer Series Paper. I'm on my second pack of this, as you can see, because it's just so awesome. And it's a great background. It's kind of hard to decide which one to use, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put that down. I'm going to go ahead and distress this. So all I did was I hold on to it and just kind of rub the bone folder along the edges. You can also run a pair of scissors along the edges, or my fingernail. But I don't like to ruin my scissors, so I'm just distressing this. Okay. And I don't mind if the paper bends or anything, because I want it to be distressed. There. Okay. I think that is, oh, see what I did? I should have let it dry a little longer. I'm going to decide that that's okay. But I'll show you the difference. See? You've learned something from my mistake. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and adhere that. And I put this down with some dimensionals just to pop it up off the page a little bit. This is some fun trim, and it's burlap ribbon. It just adds a little fun texture, and I'm trying to decide if it should be maybe up here. And then I just kind of flayed it apart a little bit just to roughen it up a little bit. I find the easiest way to attach this ribbon is to take some tear tape and just put it down where you want the ribbon to go. Okay, and then I'm going to put this right on top. Splay this out a little bit more. Okay, and again, I'm going to use the tear tape. It just gets a nice coverage on top of bumpy ribbon. And this time I'll put it here. It's easier to stick it to paper than it is to stick it to the ribbon. Okay, and then I just tied a little bow with some linen thread. I love Stampin' Up! Linen thread. Go, it's really pretty. Let's make it tiny. And I'm going to attach that with just a little bit of glue dot. I'm going to roll that glue dot up to make it smaller. There we go. Okay, that is my card start to finish watercoloring, and again, don't do that. So here you go. Here is the original, and here is another one that I made. This one I used wood textures. It's called Wooden Plank, and it's a textured embossing folder, and then I just went over it with a sponge to kind of highlight the textures in the wood. Otherwise, the watercoloring is exactly the same. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed it and got some watercoloring tips. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you watch again. Bye-bye.